Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Mark Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Mark Goldstein.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to live and retire in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? It's become very popular lately. So stay tuned and stay to the end of the podcast episode and find out. Today we have our special guest, Mike Madden. Mike was born in 1952, raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He moved to South Bend, Indiana for college and then to Washington, D.C. for medical school and residency. He married and then raised three sons in Northeast Pennsylvania, a small town outside of Erie. Due to a job change, he moved to Pittsburgh in 2002. After 25 years of marriage, he decided it was time to live authentically as a gay man. In 2005, he met Ron Cenarius, a polyglot and Latin teacher, and they married in 2015 when it was finally legal. I had to look up polyglot before. Together, after enjoying traveling, and their travel claim to fame is dancing to Dancing Queen on all 7 continents. You have to explain that to me, too.
Sure.
They particularly enjoy gay cruises, 10 so far, and land excursions with gay groups. Mike has also traveled to all 50 states. That's pretty impressive. COVID clipped their travel wings, and in 2020, they decided to buy a winter home in Phoenix, hi neighbor, during a bike ride. Family is important to them, especially spending time with their 5 children. 3 followed them to Pittsburgh, 1 to Phoenix, and their 5 grandsons. Other interests include the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Fighting Irish, hitting the gym, riding bikes, participating in cultural events, having dinners with friends, supporting gay-focused organizations, and hosting other snowbirds in Phoenix. And Mike is Michael Madden, MD, is a self-employed consultant to health plans and corporations, currently focused on tobacco harm reduction and efforts to get to 0 new cases of HIV/AIDS. Regarding THR, he has published opinion pieces in Newsweek and several regional newspapers, testified before legislative bodies in 10 states, and educated healthcare providers on this critical public health strategy in various settings. Well, Mike, you did quite a lot, and you have a good bio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. And we've actually met in person. So it's a little bit different than your normal podcast when I don't know, what's going to be or who's going to be on the other side of the screen. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
So let's open up. What makes Pittsburgh such an attractive city for the LGBTQ community and retirees? Is there something unique about the atmosphere or community that stands out? I know Pittsburgh lately has been getting a lot of positive press as far as retirement city.
Right. It really has. Well, I think that's because it's an East Coast city, sort of, with a Midwest vibe and friendliness. It's big enough to have really good amenities, about 300,000 people in the city, 1.2 million in the county, but limited hassle. And I think it's got a couple of good gay bona fides. Most people don't know Queer as Folk was set there, at least the U.S. version, although admittedly most of it was filmed in Toronto, but it was set there on Liberty Avenue near where I live. Mr. Rogers is from Pittsburgh, and I think he's probably our first LGBT ally, or at least a good neighbor. And one more is that our police chief happens to be gay. Not too many cities can say that.
Pretty cool. So, and Pittsburgh has reinvented itself for years, from its industrial past to a modern tech-driven city. How do you feel this transformation has impacted retirees in the LGBTQ community? Has it impacted at all?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Well, first and foremost, the smoke is mostly gone. So it's no
Yay.
longer the smoky city. We don't have the world's best air quality, but it's nothing like it was. There's no gray buildings anymore. A lot of people with the steel mills closing moved out in the 80s and 90s, but since then the population has stabilized to growing slowly. Prior to COVID, the downtown, I thought, really felt like a mini Manhattan. A lot of high rises and lots of activity on the streets. COVID clipped that a bit. The offices obviously are less occupied. The crowding's down a bit, but it's coming back. I think downtown Pittsburgh is kind of reinventing itself the way the whole city did back with the steel mill change. And it'll take some time to fully reinvent. Not that it's gone, but it's going to take some work to get to where it was. Fortunately, there's some assets, with Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh, and Duquesne University. This would probably surprise a lot of people that it's estimated we have 145,000 college students in
Wow.
Pittsburgh and the Allegheny County. And there's a really strong tech sector, partly because of those universities. Lots of AI, lots of autonomous vehicle development. You see these driverless things going around a good bit. So,
Oh, you have them too in
Oh, yeah.
Pittsburgh, like we
Yep.
have in Phoenix?
yep, definitely do. We don't have taxis yet, but they're
Okay.
mostly trial at this point.
Yep. Yeah, we have those driverless vehicles running all around Phoenix, as you know. Okay, interesting. So let's talk a little bit about Pittsburgh's climate. How would you describe Pittsburgh's climate throughout the year, and how have you seen it change in the past decade due to climate change?
I call it, we have 3 great seasons and 1 gray one. I think that we're maybe the second cloudiest big city in the country after Seattle, but that's mostly in winter. There's a really nice change of seasons. I think the fall is lasting longer with climate change, going later into the year. Spring's coming earlier. I don't think the summers have really gotten that much hotter, though. And, I think days over 90 are like, oh my God, it's terrible. And that's certainly not much to Phoenix people, and a lot less snow than there used to be, I think, is the other thing I've noticed.
Is it humid in the summer?
It can be sometimes, but it's not really like the East Coast humid or the South, but it can be kind of humid sometimes. It's certainly relative to Phoenix, yes.
Right, and not relative to Phoenix, but it's not Florida in any way.
Right. No, not Florida, definitely.
Okay. Any flooding concerns?
Well, Pittsburgh is there because it's the confluence of 3 rivers. 2 rivers come together and form the Ohio right there. And so it had a long history of flooding, maybe before flooding became fashionable. But fortunately, in the years gone by, a lot of work's been done to mitigate that, to prevent flooding, and with upstream, rivers or dams and lakes and things. So I think Pittsburgh's relatively disaster-free. We have very rare tornadoes. We've had some rain from hurricanes, but unlike poor southeast right now, the worst rain we ever had from a hurricane was 6 inches from Ivan in 2004, and no real earthquake risk. So I think we're, relatively disaster-free. I grew up in Oklahoma where there were tornadoes all the time. We don't see that. And in terms of what's being done to mitigate it, I talked about the flooding part. One thing that from electrical standpoint they're doing is that people in Pittsburgh can opt to get their electricity from purely clean sources, windmills and solar. And that's a checkbox you make in making your electricity company decisions.
And it doesn't cost any more, right?
No.
Okay, that's pretty good. Now, Pittsburgh, I know in winter, they get cold winters. So how much snow do you get?
Not that much anymore. I gotta think last year it was no more than 10 or 15 inches for the whole winter, if that. A big snowstorm now is like 3 inches.
That's not bad at all.
No.
I'm used to the New York
the people
snows
kind
and
of think
blizzard.
of the snow belt, but that's northwest Pennsylvania. That's about 2 hours north of Pittsburgh. That's where you get the lake effect snow. And they do get heavy snows up there, but that mostly goes away by the time it gets down to us because we're about 2 hours south of the lake.
Is that like Lake Erie up there?
Yes, Lake Erie's up there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you're pretty safe from this lake effect. I know that the lake effect can be pretty.
Oh yeah, well I lived up there,
pretty mean.
and yeah, there were times when you'd pull up to the intersection and have to kind of look around because the snow was so high.
Right, right. Okay. With rising concerns about climate change, has Pittsburgh started preparing for, well, you said they are preparing for potential impacts with flooding. How about heat waves or severe storms? Do you know anything
Yeah, we
that
really,
they're,
like I say, we don't have the tornado things that I grew up with. I mean, I even had a tornado shelter in my backyard growing up,
wow.
and we don't see any of that in Pittsburgh. And there was one sort of very brief tornado warning this summer, and everybody was all excited. Oh my God, what do you do with that? Uh, there's no tornado sirens or any of that kind of stuff.
So you don't feel like Dorothy with
No,
Toto.
there's none of that going on. And like I say, the flooding thing really, I think, has been pretty well managed. I mean, I live on the river, but we are officially out of the floodplain. And I live right by where the three rivers come together. But from a flood standpoint, they don't consider us in a floodplain.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about geography. So, for someone new to Pittsburgh, how does the city's geography shape daily life? Are there certain areas that are more retiree friendly at all?
Sure.
Can
Sure.
you also explain, like, where is Pittsburgh located in all of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, it's in it's called southwestern Pennsylvania. It's kind of and Pittsburgh has sometimes been called the Paris of Appalachia. And it's in pretty much the southwest corner. We're about 40 miles, I think, from Ohio and from West Virginia, and a little bit of West Virginia that sneaks up there. And so very southwest, about halfway between New York and Chicago, is some way sometimes we describe it to people in other countries. So it's very hilly. We are in the Appalachians, and downtown is kind of low, but right across the river goes up about 400 feet, I think, to an area called Mount Washington, which is great for views of downtown. And they have funiculars going up the sides of the cliff there.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that on a video.
Used to take. They're fun to take out of towners on, and a beautiful walk along the edge of the ridge up there, and beautiful to look from our windows across there in the fall to see the trees there changing. But so it's very hilly. Downtown is really in the middle of the metropolitan area. It's not like it's lopsided like some cities. So that kind of mitigates traffic issues pretty much because everybody's going opposite directions. There's one north-south interstate and pretty much two east-west ones. And so that makes it very accessible that way and mitigates any real traffic issues. Other than there's a couple of tunnels and a couple of bridges that have some backup during rush hour, but not too much in the way of traffic. But it's a city of bridges because of the hills and because of the rivers and streams. In fact, I'm not sure I could fact check this, but it's said that we are either the first or second bridgiest city in the world, right up there with Venice, depending on how you count them and that sort of thing. And then geographically, we're close to things. For instance, the Erie area is about an hour and a half to 2 hours north of us, where Presque Isle State Park is. And that's, if you want beach type summer vacation, they've got about 7 miles of a peninsula out into Lake Erie. And if it's windy coming from the west, they get some good waves. There's mountains with skiing just an hour and a half away to the east. There's raft trips on the rivers. It's a pretty quick trip up to Niagara Falls or over to Falling Water, Frank Lloyd Wright's UNESCO Heritage Architectural Site, and even wineries, kind of like along Lake Erie, kind of like the Finger Lake region of New York. So yeah, geographically, a nice bunch of variety.
Now, talking about the bridges, the most bridgiest place, I don't know if I read wrong, but I thought I read something like Pittsburgh had like 400 bridges.
Oh, at least. Yeah.
They do?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
400 is a lot.
It's a lot of bridges.
It's a lot.
All those hills and then the rivers and streams leading to them. But yeah, there's a lot of bridges. 400.
Where do they have 400 bridges? That's pretty funny.
Well, I can see 6 or 7 right from my condo crossing the rivers. Yeah.
Okay. And explain, so you live in the downtown in a condo, right?
Right.
And let's talk a little bit about walkability too.
Sure.
So you said previously that it is pretty walkable where you are. Can you
Correct.
Elaborate on that and tell
Yeah.
us?
Well, downtown, I think, I call it maybe the most walkable neighborhood in the United States, depending on what you want to do and like. Because, and somebody needs to correct me if I'm wrong, fact check this if you would, but right from my condo, within a mile, I can walk to 3 major league sports venues, football, baseball, and
Hockey.
we've got Point State Park across the street, a casino, lots of museums, world-class symphony, opera, Broadway shows, live theater, restaurants, gyms that take silver sneakers. They benefit for some Medicare Advantage people to have a free gym. My PCP is across the street. I used to work across the street. There's an Amtrak station, a long-distance bus station, a bikeway right from us all the way to D.C.
Wow.
So, my husband and I don't have a car. And so if any of the listeners want to tell me of a place that's got all that within a mile walking, I'd love to hear it, because I say that, and every now and then I wonder, should I fact check that? But we don't have a car in Pittsburgh. We use transit, we bike, we use Ubers. We can even walk without crossing the street to a rental car facility if we want to go on a weekend somewhere. And 2 of them, actually, Dollar and Avis, and free grocery delivery. Not free, but grocery delivery services, and a downtown Target that's got a grocery.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So the public transit for seniors in Pittsburgh is free. There's a light rail.
That's amazing too.
Do what?
That amazes me.
Yeah, free for seniors, because the ad for the lottery is it supports older Pennsylvanians. So people who buy those lottery tickets, and I get a free bus pass.
So is it light rail?
So there are regular buses. They're developing a thing called bus rapid transit that's kind of a cross between a light rail and a bus, with a dedicated lane between downtown and Oakland, which is the college part of Pittsburgh. And then there's dedicated busways going to the east and to the west. And in fact, we have a really pretty much nonstop bus from downtown to the airport. And like I say, you ride it for free. So it's a really good public transit with a great app that tells you when the next one's coming. And so those are great. So that's kind
awesome.
of the public transit side. And we do have a light rail that goes underground downtown and over to the North Shore, where the 2 big stadiums are. So a lot of people park downtown and take the rail underground to get over to the stadiums.
And how far is the Pittsburgh airport?
Oh, about
from
from downtown. There can be traffic at rush hour. Absent rush hour traffic, I think I went last time in 18 minutes.
Can't beat it.
Yeah,
So-
I got an Uber down there. It's pretty easy.
Pretty
And
good.
there's lots of Ubers at the airport there, and they even still have taxis too.
They still do?
They do. From downtown, actually, mostly
From the airport?
Yeah, to downtown.
Got it.
Since you mentioned the airport, so we've got a great airport, nonstop service to 52 cities, which a lot of people would be surprised at, I think. And they're building a new $1 billion terminal that's supposed to open next year. We got great train service to Chicago, to Philly and New York City on one train line, and then down to D.C. And they just announced that the one to D.C. is now going to keep going all the way to Miami with all the kind of stops along the way. So that's a great one.
That's awesome.
Really strong bike culture. Again, it's something I think a lot of people might not think about, particularly in a hilly city like Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you can stay along the rivers and not have to climb the hills.
Yeah, I don't want to climb the hills.
Although there's this thing called Pogo that you can rent an electric bike pretty cheaply.
Good.
One of my jobs gives me access to that for free. And those are really fun to take around town. But the riverfront trails, they've really done a good job developing those and other protected bike lanes. A lot of people would be surprised to know you can go nonstop on a rail to trails from Pittsburgh to D.C. with almost no time on city streets. It's all rails to trails. It's called the Great Allegheny Passage. And then other bike stuff. Once a month in the summer, there's a thing called Open Streets where they close a whole neighborhood of streets with no cars and thousands of people bike ride on them. There's a thing called the Dirty Dozen Hill Ride because we do have the hills. And if you're really into hill riding, you can challenge yourself to do that. And then another way to challenge yourself is that every month in the summer there's an underwear bike ride.
That's pretty funny. So everybody rides their bike in underwear?
Rides in their bike in their underwear and meets up at a bar. It's an adult activity.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, and then we got river boats on the rivers too for tours, or some people park where they get the riverboat and they take it over to the stadiums rather than parking by the stadiums for a game.
Awesome, Mike. So let's talk a little bit about cost of living and affordability.
Sure.
How accessible is home ownership in Pittsburgh? What is the median price for a single family home or condo right now? And,
I did a little research on that. So in August of this year, the median listing price for a home in Pittsburgh was $259,000, which is up about 3.8% from a year ago. And despite that, this listing said that Pittsburgh is only bested by Detroit to have the most affordable housing costs of a major city in the U.S. And that was in 2023. Along those lines, the U.S. News and World Report ranking of best places to retire for anybody, not just gay people, 7 of their top 10 were in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, partly because of housing costs, but also because Pennsylvania doesn't tax income from pensions, Social Security, or 401ks. So the two of those together, and just so you know, Pittsburgh was number 10 on that list. So there were a few more affordable places in Pennsylvania than Pittsburgh, but I don't think they've got our amenities.
Yeah, you have the amenities. Does it change? Do you think the cost of living or price for median home price changes in the downtown area? Like you have all of that walkable convenience.
Yeah.
I can't picture 220,000 getting a condo in downtown.
Well, actually, I mean, if a 1-bedroom, you might be able to in the building I live in. Pittsburgh, unfortunately, doesn't have enough downtown housing, particularly condos. There's only 3 or 4 condo type developments there. And but I think you could probably squeeze into a 1-bedroom for around that. Current estimate of ours, which was originally a 3-bedroom, but we converted it into a 1-bedroom because we didn't want our kids to live with us.
Oh, great idea.
It has kind of a guest room, but it's an office.
Just make it all big.
Yeah. Anyway, and I think now Zillow kind of estimates $450 for it.
Okay, still reasonable. Now let's talk a little bit about property tax. So Pennsylvania's property tax is pretty high in comparison to other states like Arizona, for example.
Right. Right. Well, it's the primary way to fund the schools, for one, and then county government, too, is how that's funded. There's no, kind of county tax. There's a little bit of a earned income tax in the city of Pittsburgh, but not a general income tax if you're not earning money. So that is one way to do it. There's a weird part of the assessment law in Pennsylvania, though, that like our place most houses have not been reassessed unless they've sold since 2013. So they can have a pretty low assessment on them. I think ours is assessed for $230 or something like that. And they don't increase it so far until it sells. So unfortunately, somebody who might buy it may have, but at $238, I think is our assessment. We pay about $4,000 to the county and about $1,000 to the city. So
a little bit over $5,000 total.
Right.
Okay. It's still, as compared to, I'm comparing it to Arizona, of course. And Arizona. And what's your square footage?
1,700.
Okay. So I have a 1,700 in Phoenix and we pay 26 and change. So,
okay. Yeah.
But I don't think most of that goes to education. That's the difference.
Yeah. The state income tax is only 3%. I'm not sure what Arizona's is, and that's for the income that we would have to pay for, which most of our income isn't taxed at the state level.
Right. Okay. How about renting? If you were to rent 1 to 2 bedroom apartment in the city, what would it cost?
Well, I looked that up, and the average rent in Pittsburgh is $1,300 a month, which is 16% lower than the national average. And Zillow said it's about 1,100 for a 1-bedroom and 1,400 for a 2-bedroom. Now, I got to tell you that average may come down because of some neighborhoods that I think gay people may not choose to live in. So I suspect that the rents would be higher in many of the places gays would want to move and retire to. But that is the average. And so if you got to compare averages, that's the average.
Right. Okay. That's fair. And how about cost of groceries and utilities to the national average? Is it cheaper?
Well, I couldn't find a cost comparison for electricity, except that our rate is about, in the state, is about 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which to me seemed like kind of in the middle. And the rates in Pittsburgh, for some reason, are slightly higher than the state average. Food and transportation, by one listing I saw, said that on average, the rest of the state goods and services are 6% lower than the national average. And healthcare is like 8% lower than national average.
Wow. So we're getting bargains there.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why so many are in that U.S. News and World Report listing.
It's at least 7 in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, so less than the national average is always good.
You like that? Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, we downtown. I mean, there's lots of farmers markets around because there is a lot of farming in the area around Pittsburgh, and pretty much every good-sized neighborhood has a farmers market at least once a week. Even downtown, we have one, and a lot of my neighbors, that's their primary shopping spot in the summer months. It actually goes from spring to fall.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare access. Healthcare is so crucial for retirees, and the older you get, the more healthcare you need.
We're consumers.
We are consumers. How accessible are physicians and specialists in Pittsburgh? And do you have long wait times for an appointment?
You know, you mentioned that I am a physician, and my later years I was in health insurance, both on the Medicaid side and on for Blue Cross. So I know a little bit about this stuff. There's 2 large health systems that dominate the market in Pittsburgh, UPMC and Allegheny Health Network. And they really compete aggressively. And because of that, they work pretty hard to strive to keep access high, because if you want to compete but you have no access, what's the point?
Right.
So I think there really is a motivation for that. And in my health insurance work, we got complaints from people about the healthcare system, obviously, from time to time. And I don't really recall many serious complaints or consistent complaints about access. They complain about a lot of things, but access wasn't one of the ones that we heard that much about.
How about quality?
Well, so these 2 systems are kind of fully integrated health systems with their own health insurance companies. And I can tell you that we look aggressively at the quality of those providers. And that actually I was in charge of quality performance management for the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association at one time. So again, kind of in my field, and quality is good. These hospital systems do regularly have people that or hospitals that are ranked on the U.S. News and World Reports of best hospitals for this, that, and the other thing. And they like to really tout those. So we hear about it. So yeah, I think the quality's very solid.
Yeah, I mean, they're excellent.
I can't say we've got any, the Children's Hospital is great. The UPMC system and the University Hospital probably has, maybe a little more reputation, although Allegheny Health Network also has transplant services, great cardiac services, all that kind of thing. So they're both, I think, very solid quality.
So what are we talking about? If I make an appointment, you think I have a 2-week wait on average?
With a new provider, I guess you're saying?
Maybe more.
No, I don't think so. Not necessarily. I mean, for certain isolated specialties, that could be the case, but I would say not. I think dental is a little more of an issue than medical. But for most things, 2 weeks, I can't imagine much longer than that generally.
That's great. That's great, because there are places that are much, much longer.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
Yeah. All right, then. So excellent. Check. Excellent healthcare. Check that off. What's your experience with LGBTQ friendly healthcare providers
Sure.
and facilities in the city? Are there any good resources for LGBTQ plus seniors?
Yeah, I was board president of one of them. I think there's really four pretty large centers for LGBT care in the city. Allies for Health and Wellbeing was the one I was affiliated with, and that started as in the 1980s, particularly focused on HIV care, but now has evolved into really full service care for the LGBT community. Similarly, well, the Perseid Center is actually the second oldest LGBT counseling center in the country, and even recently added a gymnasium specifically for the trans community, which I didn't realize would be a thing. But they also every week sponsor a session for that they call the Older Wiser Leaders, OWLS for short. It's kind of like SAGE that people may have heard of in other communities.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trans United is focused then on the needs of the trans community. Shepherd Wellness is focused on the needs of those people living with HIV. So, and been around for a long time with lots of support services for them. We also have the Pitt Men's Study looking at the impact of HIV on particularly men's lives, obviously. And it's just celebrated its 40th anniversary of working in this research field.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was actually a participant in that because they were looking at screening as well.
Check the box on that one. So it looks like, as far as everyone and the LGBTQ community has a vibrant healthcare system in
I think,
Pittsburgh.
yeah, and there's options too. I only listed one of the four, but there are three others that are really solid options for people too.
That's great. That is wonderful. So how would you describe Pittsburgh's LGBTQ plus scene? Is there a vibrant community or a neighborhood, so to speak, or is it more low key?
Yeah, well, part of the question also relates to is there a center or anything? So there is the Equality Center that's for LGBTQ resources. They probably most famously host a very large monthly gay bingo session to raise money for the center and some other get-togethers as well. There's in development right now a new housing facility in Oakland, the university area, specifically for lower income LGBTQ members. And
That's
they're going to
wonderful.
have 48 units for rent open next year.
That's great.
There's 5 gay bars in various parts of town. There's not really a specific gay community or gay neighborhood, really. Kind of used to be, but not so much anymore. In terms of other kind of gay focused activities to ways to meet people, there's a pretty active gay club sports scene. We got bowling, bocce, kickball, softball. There's a fair number of gay naked activities for those that want those. There's
Tell us.
What?
Tell us.
Yeah, well, there's yoga, karaoke, trivia, and bowling, which I love the name for that one. It's called Balls Out Bowling.
That cracks me up. Naked bowling and naked karaoke.
Naked karaoke. Yeah. You let it all hang out when you sing, I guess. I don't know.
Holy shit. Especially seniors, the balls will drop.
And then there's some other kinds of activities, perhaps a little more mainstream. But there's gay line dancing and square dancing. There's a group called G2H2, specifically for older seniors. That G2H2 means Gay Guy Happy Hour.
Okay.
That's been around for years and years. Once a month, moves around to different bars around town, not all necessarily gay-focused bars. And there's a large Pride celebration held simultaneously downtown with the annual big outdoor arts festival, 10-day Festival of the Arts downtown Pittsburgh. And then again, for those that may have some other interests, there's 3 gay campgrounds within a 2-hour drive. One of them is called Roseland down in West Virginia, and it's always in the top 10 of best gay campgrounds in the country. And it's in a beautiful, very rural setting up in the mountains in West Virginia. So easy trip to get down there.
Interesting. So no shortage of gay community.
There really isn't. I think you can find your tribe.
I think so too. So there's no specific, like Philadelphia has, like, they have the gayborhood, right? Which is basically where a lot of businesses, bars, and restaurants are. So I think Pittsburgh, I read two areas. Is one Squirrel something and another area right outside the city. I think that's the gay area, or
Well, I
what they
guess you
say.
could say that, but I don't really think we have a gayborhood. The one that I think used to be the gay neighborhood was Shadyside, but
That's
I
it.
think yeah, but I think people have more distributed all over now. Shadyside is like just east of Oakland, where the universities are, so it's kind of a livelier, younger gay neighborhood that way. Squirrel Hill, you mentioned, is residential and multicultural community. It actually historically was known as the Jewish neighborhood, particularly Orthodox Jews. More recently, an awful lot of the Asian students and faculty from Pitt and Carnegie Mellon in particular have lived there. So you see a very active Asian presence there. And then I think people who really want fantastic views would live up on Mount Washington because they really just have a spectacular view of downtown
Mhm.
and the rivers, or downtown in a high rise like we do. And then there's a couple others that are kind of fun. The Strip District, and it's not naked. It's because it's a narrow strip of land between the river and where the hills go up. Used to be warehouses mostly. A lot of ethnic grocery stores and fish markets and things like that there, but now has developed into residential and kind of where some of the AI stuff is. So it's a pretty vibrant, actively developing neighborhood. And Lawrenceville is kind of cool and trendy, and that's just east of the Strip District. And then the Mexican War Streets, for people who like more historic architecture, they call it that because it was built during the Mexican War, and
Mhm.
all of the streets are named after battles or generals from the Mexican War. And that's got a lot of historic brick row houses. Kind of looks like Philly in a way. But then there's some nice suburbs too: Mount Lebanon, Fox Chapel, Oakmont, where they hold the Golf U.S. Open pretty regularly, and Sewickley are all some pretty nice, relatively close suburban areas too.
Do the suburban areas have any commuter rails that go into Pittsburgh at all?
Mount Lebanon does. Yeah, Mount Lebanon does. The others, no. They have bus service, but not rail. But
Okay.
the commute, that's why I think what made Mount Lebanon kind of popular, because it does have the rail line right into downtown from there.
Hmm. Makes sense. All right. So good areas. It seems like Pittsburgh is Philly. There's a neighborhood, different neighborhood, that comprises the whole
Yeah,
city.
they really are, and they're all kind of distinct, and you can kind of come and go, to different kind of feel for each of them. Some of them historically were ethnic based, like
Hmm.
there's actually an area called Polish Hill, and
Wow.
Bloomfield historically was the Italian neighborhood and still has the Little Italy days and that kind of thing. So there still are some closer to ethnically focused neighborhoods, but with some gentrification and things, I think that's a little less than it used to be.
It reminds me of New York in the old days too. So I
Right.
grew I grew up in Brooklyn, and different areas of Brooklyn you could have, Orthodox Jews and all different ethnicities in
Right.
different areas.
Yeah, it really was kind of. In fact, those are kind of in a row. Polish Hill leads into Bloomfield, which leads into Squirrel Hill. So it was kind of the three kind of ethnicities all in a row.
Yep. All right. So we mentioned already walkability and transportation. So really good thing that I like about I'm all about walkability. And
Right.
if you could walk pretty much everywhere, you can walk to a doctor. Can you walk to like a pharmacy
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and
and
besides
a
downtown
bank?
and all that whole list that I mentioned, I think there's a couple other really walkable neighborhoods. Maybe not quite as. I mean, they don't have the sports venues and all that kind of thing. But like the Mexican War Streets I mentioned is just across the river from downtown, and so it would have a lot of those same kinds of amenities, as well as the hospital right there too. We don't have one right downtown, although it's pretty close. But so I think that really the War Streets. Shadyside has lots of walkable amenities. Lawrenceville does, and Squirrel Hill does too. So there are other walkable ones. Not like I say, they don't have the Amtrak station or those
I
kinds of.
love that. You can walk to the Amtrak station.
Yeah,
That's
we
convenient.
yeah we did just a couple of weeks ago actually, and took the Amtrak to
Where'd
New
you
York.
go?
It's a
New
very
York?
pleasant way to go to New York. It really
I
is.
would definitely do that instead of flying,
Oh yeah, because it takes you
especially
right downtown.
it's so close to you.
And yeah, and we walked right from Penn Station in New York City to the hotel we were staying at on 28th Street. So
That's
we
great.
never used a motorized vehicle the whole time.
That
And
is
you were mentioning
awesome.
climate change. The Amtrak touts how climate friendly taking the train is relative to driving and certainly flying.
How far is it by train? Pittsburgh, New York City. Is
So
it what,
you
four or
get on
five
at
hours?
7:30 in the morning, and you're to downtown to Manhattan by 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about
So,
a it's about a 7-hour drive,
so
but then you got
it's
to figure out where to park and all that too.
it's an
So
all day
it's
thing.
a little longer than driving, but no hassle.
Yeah. I would rather sit back, relax, let somebody else do the the driving.
And it's
And
generally very quiet and relaxing. And the train pretty much goes along the river, so it can have some nice scenery along the way.
I would definitely do that. And where else besides New York does the train go to?
So you
Philly?
can get one to Chicago going west, or
Okay.
you can get one east going to DC. And as I said, that one keeps on now will keep on going all the way to Miami.
Wow.
It's a 40 something hour trip to Miami, but
Yeah.
I'd get a sleeper car for that one.
It's a little bit, yeah, it's a bit much.
But to DC it leaves at 5:30 in the morning, and you're there by 1 in the afternoon.
How about Philly? Does it go to Philly?
That it's the same one that goes on to New York. So it leaves
Okay.
at 7:30 in the morning and gets to Philly. I want to say like 2, something like that,
Okay.
1 or 2. And it's a 5-hour drive from Pittsburgh to Philly. And Pennsylvania Turnpike can be pretty pricey, so it can be a cost-effective way to get to Philly. And the flights are also ridiculously expensive for such a short trip.
Yeah. I forgot to ask about the people themselves. Do you find people more laid back and maybe nicer, the Midwest
Yeah,
type?
it definitely feels like a Midwest city. It's not the kind of
It's
pushing and
not the
shoving.
East Coast.
Yeah, it's not a. That's one of the ways that we like to look down our noses at Philly and say that we're a lot better than them.
Because to me, there is a difference. Whenever I lived in New York, I was like, oh, these New Yorkers, they're so crass. And, the Midwesterners are so kind and nice
Right.
people. So,
I think it's an East Coast city with a Midwest vibe. I really do.
yeah, I mean, for instance, I took a flop on the stairs in Grand Central one day going to work dressed up in a suit. Do you think one person said, "Sir, can I help you?" I was laying. My ankle was like blown up like this, and they stepped over me
Wow.
because there was huge amount of people just trying to run to the subway,
Right.
but they
Right.
ran over me.
Yeah,
So
I think it probably does have to do with some of that crowding thing. And it's just not that crowded
yeah,
that we have to worry about that. No, I think people would definitely be checking you out.
you know what? Now that I'm retired, I need that less of a crowding. I feel like even though I'm an urbanite and love the city and the feel and the culture of the city, I think I'm ready for a little less crowded.
Yeah.
Even though Phoenix, it's a huge city, but I don't
No,
know.
it's really spread out.
It's spread out. It really
Although
is.
the parts we live in are not quite like that. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about arts, culture, and my favorite, dining. So, Pittsburgh is known for its cultural institutions. What kind of art scene can retirees expect to enjoy? Are there museums, theaters, live music venues that are worth checking out?
Well, a lot of people may have heard of the robber barons, who were the industrialists of the late 1800s, early 20th century. And a lot of them assuaged their guilt for all the bad things they did to people by setting up some foundations. So Pittsburgh benefits from its foundation community and a rich philanthropic history. For instance, the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. With one membership, you get the art museum that has a biannual international art exposition that draws people from all over the world to display new works of art. There's a natural history section with giant dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff. A science center for the kids. And then the Andy Warhol Museum is part of that too. And a lot of people don't know Andy was from Pittsburgh, and his museum in Pittsburgh is in an old factory building, and it's the largest museum in the world dedicated to a single artist. And some people say Andy would turn over in his grave if he knew it was in Pittsburgh, but nonetheless, that was a different Pittsburgh back then when he was growing up. There's a great children's museum and quite a few art galleries. I think I previously mentioned we've got an opera. We have touring Broadway series in the winter, and then the Civic Light Opera that's locally produced productions in the summer downtown there. There's several live theaters, one of them that's specifically focused on new works. We have a world-class symphony and a beautiful redone symphony hall. The Phipps Conservatory has a beautiful chronic exhibit, but new displays every quarter. The History Museum, the Heinz History Museum, is a branch of the Smithsonian. And so it has both local exhibits and touring national ones.
What's in the Heinz Museum? Ketchup?
Yeah, no.
Pickles?
A lot of Western Pennsylvania stuff. They have a standing exhibit for Mr. Rogers and the Native American history, the things about the War of British and Indian War, and because that took place, some of it right in Pittsburgh there. George Washington came to Pittsburgh, by the way, as part of all that. In fact, Pittsburgh was founded in 1742.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Carnegie. I say Carnegie, but you say Carnegie. Is it the same? Is it the same like Carnegie Hall?
Yeah.
Like from New York?
I'm talking like a Yinzer. That's Pittsburgh language.
But they talk like that.
Yeah.
In
Carnegie.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Carnegie.
Carnegie. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same one as Carnegie Hall. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But in
Carnegie
Pittsburgh,
Hall.
It's the Carnegie Museums. So,
Carnegie.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And then what else?
I picked up on
got
that.
A great zoo. We have the National Aviary is there, which my grandkids call the Bird Zoo. And then, of course, if you want to talk about our culture, you can't not talk about the Steelers, Pens, and Pirates, with all having the same colors, black and gold, which I don't know if any other city does that all their teams are the same colors. But
interesting.
It's a pretty sports crazy city, and the Steelers travel better than just about any other NFL team. For a lot of the other teams complain it's a home game for us when we play at their stadium.
That's what I hear. You see people all over the streets, right, with their jerseys on, and sports fans all over the place.
So for your listeners who are grandparents like me, there's a lot of great grandparent options for outings with the grandkids, with the Science Center, the Children's Museum. There's an optical illusion museum, the zoo, the aviary, water parks. Kennywood's one of the great old amusement parks in the country. City pools and splash pads. So a lot of great outing opportunities for grandparents.
I could be your grandkid.
There you go. I'll be your daddy.
Okay, daddy. Who's your daddy? Okay, so there's a lot of cultural things. You have live theater. I've seen pictures of the theaters. They're just they're beautiful.
Oh, the downtown area, the part that they now call the cultural district, used to be the red light district. And all these philanthropic people got together and bought up a lot of the land down through there and spent $1 bazillion redoing what were either empty spaces, factories, or into
shows.
Just some world-class theaters. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. How about the dining scene, restaurant scene? I know pierogies, right?
Oh yeah, pierogies are a thing, as are Permane sandwich, which is Yinzer for sandwiches. I'm not proud of that one.
What's on that?
A whole bunch of meat with the coleslaw and the French fries all between the buns.
Wow. French fries
in the sandwich. Yeah. Yeah. You pretty much have to deconstruct it to eat it. It's just too tall.
Yeah.
But that's a popular item. And, with all the focus on our politics right now, they've all come through and tried to eat a pierogi and a Permane sandwich. So, but
pierogies, I was surprised.
Oh, yeah. Well, because of the Polish influence, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the Pirates, one of their shows during the in-between innings is a pierogi race that people dressed up as pierogies and they run around the bases.
Oh my God. Bunch of pierogies.
Are a thing. But for more upscale restaurants. So we do have 2 Beard-nominated chefs in Pittsburgh, and people would probably be surprised to know that one of them is a vegan restaurant called Apteka,
Wow.
and the other one is a Thai restaurant called Pusadi's Garden. So you don't necessarily think about Thai and vegan associated with Pittsburgh, I don't think.
Right. No.
We just got a restaurant on the New York Times top 50 list of restaurants um, called Fetfisk, which I don't think has anything to do with fetish, but it sounds like it might.
That's what it sounds like.
But it's supposed to be very good. I hadn't heard about it till this, and so I can't wait to get there. Con Alma is a bar restaurant downtown that Esquire put on its best bars in the U.S. list. And then the Pittsburgh Magazine has an annual listing of the top 25 restaurants. So if you don't know where to go, you can find one there. Or the city paper has a public poll of people voting on their favorites. Lots of breweries. There's some restaurant areas that they just clumped a whole bunch in kind of the same neighborhood. So you can kind of wander around. And then one plus post-COVID is that we've got a provision for sidewalk dining in a lot of, particularly downtown, but other areas.
I like
Some
that.
nearby wineries, as I mentioned, is another option too.
So, being downtown, are there any restaurants that you could walk to?
Oh, absolutely. I got married in one. I
Wow.
didn't tell you that. Yeah.
No.
We got married across the street from where we live. This was not a local one necessarily, but Eddie Merlot's
Wow.
Steakhouse. And it was a locally sourced wedding.
So cool.
Yeah, very local. So
That is
cool. there's a lot to walk to downtown, and not just chains. I mean, there's a lot of local ones there. A great sushi one that we went to the other night, Meat and Potatoes. There's Mexican. There's Bourbon and Bridges, which is a bar restaurant. So yeah, a lot of good options right by us.
Or, if it's not, I'm sure it's a short Uber away.
Oh yeah, but we really pretty much eat downtown, to be honest with you. A great
I would
Argentinian.
too, if you have it available.
Yeah, really nice Argentinian just 2 blocks away from us too. Yeah.
That's so great. That walkability thing, restaurants too.
It's very nice. I mean, I thought we were
key.
convenient in Phoenix, but we do have it beat in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
That's great. Good. It's something to think about for those. There are many people in our community that want to settle down into a city where that's walkable. So,
Right. I think it's a big plus personally.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, okay, great restaurants. That checks the box too, Mike. So
I'm not being paid by the Chamber of
by the
Commerce.
city in the city of Pittsburgh. Talk a little bit about crime and safety. Do you feel safe where you are?
I do. I mean, maybe a little less so than pre-COVID, just because there aren't quite as many people on the streets, and so the relative percentage of workers to homeless people has shifted a bit since then. But so there is some panhandling on the streets in downtown for sure. I think not so much in the other neighborhoods I've mentioned, but more so downtown. I don't see it anywhere near as much in the Shady Side or Squirrel Hill or these other places.
Is the city doing anything?
We just built, and all these philanthropic people got together and built a new homeless shelter on the edge of downtown, actually right next door to the city jail or county jail, which is a little weird. But the plus is that it's not necessarily affecting other people who own their place. So that's nice. They put in some new rules about encampments, and so they can be closed if there's any crime associated with them. There's really only one downtown anymore, and it's really tucked away right in the same area with the jail and the homeless shelter. But they do close them down, and it's compassionate closing. They will not close it till they go in and try to find some place for everybody to go. If they refuse, that's something different. And they don't bulldoze it. They, tell them they collect their stuff and they store it for them and things like that if they need to.
That's good because, cities, if they just say, okay, go, where do they go?
Right.
They're just pushing them from one place to another.
It's a big political issue right now for both city, county, and state government to come up with more housing options.
Yeah.
Particularly for homeless people, but others too. But So anyway, but then other things that are happening is that they did open a new kind of precinct office downtown. They
Hmm.
substantially increased the number of patrols on the street, and they've done some of the thing you see in some progressive places of matching a social worker with the police patrols. So they're doing a lot of that. And they've got this Pittsburgh Welcome Team, I think is what it's called, that does a number of things, both helping people who can't find their way, but also helping homeless people. And they even do CPR and have naloxone for overdoses and things.
Wow.
So a lot of different activities like that.
That's good. So, do you feel safe? Like if you had to walk the dog like at 2 a.m, just like we had to the other day,
Yeah.
would you, like going outside of your condo, do you feel safe?
Yeah. Now I got to tell you that we're right next to the state park, and we have a very nice park-like area behind us. So it's not like we're surrounded by high rises right there. But I feel very safe right there. I go out and sit on our plaza all the time. Probably not too much at 2 a.m.
Not
But
2 a.m, but
yeah, but other times. But yeah, I think I would. I think I would. Yeah. And
okay.
I've been involved with the management of our condo association, and I only recall in 22 years, two or three people that had any direct crime related issues that filtered up, at least to the board level, that we heard about.
Hmm. So, no violent crime going on in your particular area?
Not that I can think of. I mean, there was a robbery kind of
Hmm.
thing, but
Yeah.
not anything too much. But the statistics, I will tell you that this U.S. News thing I was looking at did say Pittsburgh was slightly higher than the national average for violent crime and other kinds of crime. I follow them in the paper, and I don't think very many of them are in neighborhoods that most of the gays would probably move to. The neighborhoods
Right.
that I read about are not
We're
those neighborhoods.
particular, when it
Yeah,
comes to that. So, like, I'm trying to compare to like Phoenix. Phoenix, you hear of a lot of stuff going on all the time. Like, I get Newsbreak. I should really unsubscribe to that because every 2 seconds there's something going on
right,
somewhere.
right,
So Phoenix has, it depends upon what area you're in as well.
right.
We're kind of where we are, we're kind of in that bubble.
Right, right. And I think most of the neighborhoods the gays would live in Pittsburgh are that way.
Hmm.
And those neighborhoods are all reasonably contiguous. So
Hmm.
it's not like you have to go through a place that might be riskier to get to Lawrenceville or to
Right.
Oakland or something like that.
That's good. Yeah, that's definitely good. All right. So, final insights. If someone from the LGBTQ community is considering retiring in Pittsburgh, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's a medium sized big city with almost every big city amenity you would want, but easily accessible and relatively hassle free with a relatively low cost of living due to the housing costs and the state tax issue with no taxes on pensions and Social Security. So I think it's a good choice for people as long as they understand the winter will be gray, and there's probably nothing more fun than a winter vacation to a warm location if you're living in a northern city.
Phoenix.
Yeah, it makes you pretty. That's really why we bought the house there. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I could understand. You need, if you get those gray days, I think if I'm not mistaken, you get, I don't know if it's 174 gray days or 174 sunny days.
Well, they're pretty much the same thing.
Same thing. Right. Pretty much. So, yeah,
Yeah, I would say that it's probably more sunny than
sunny
gray,
days.
but you can see it's not real far apart. But the
Right.
other thing I would say is most of those are in the winter, not so much
Yeah.
in the spring and summer and fall.
Okay. That's good. That's good. What's something about living in Pittsburgh that might surprise someone who's thinking of relocating there?
Yeah, I guess this is both surprise and summary, but how much there is to do, how cosmopolitan it is, and how accessible that is. And I guess the one thing that might be a little bit of a surprise is that on a spring afternoon in 2026, you'd be able to attend the outdoor NFL draft and walk 4 blocks to the Andy Warhol Museum in the same afternoon.
Wow. Well, that's great. Yeah, I've discovered, in research, doing a little bit of research on Pittsburgh, it really has a lot to offer as far as amenities. And it's like a big city amenity, but kind of a smaller city.
Yep. Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I think that's true, and I'm not sure that every one of our amenities are world class, but I think they're all very good. And so, yeah, I think that's very true. And the accessibility, to get to, if you don't like where you are and you want to try something different, you can get to a lot of places pretty easily.
Accessibility, walkability, things to do, culture, arts. I checked boxes on everything. So yeah, what's so bad? So yeah, I'm going to come visit one day.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts that you might have, Mike?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered the bases. I appreciate the opportunity to push me to do a little research that I didn't know some of this stuff before I started getting ready for this, but knew a fair amount of it. But
there you go. That's why I enjoy doing these too. I get to meet people all over the world, and yeah, I get to learn about different places. It's really a great education as well for me.
Sure.
So totally enjoy doing it.
Great.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for coming and
happy to do it. It's been very fun.
Being a part of this podcast. We do appreciate it. And thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.